I'll say good evening a few times. I know it takes a few minutes for our attendees to join the session. So as we are waiting for our participants to join, good evening, everyone. We have a nice group of speakers tonight, and we are all looking forward to getting this show on the road. So just a couple more minutes, not a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds while we wait for the last of the participants to join. Welcome everyone. Oh, hey Ratine, I see you out there. You know what I feel like right now, I don't know if anyone does Peloton, but you know, you have these instructors and they sit at the front of this empty classroom and they have these dialogues with only themselves, and they're looking at this screen on the side and saying, you know, good evening, Jim Wirch, Jisang, good to see you. So Latanya, Kristen, welcome, Loris, Chancellor Emeritus Mark Wrighton has joined us, Messi. So good evening, everyone. Good morning for those of you that are coming from far away. Welcome to our first Global Leadership Vision session for the 2020-2021 academic year. I sincerely wish we were able to do this session in person, but it wasn't to be in the cards for tonight's event. This doesn't change the fact that our scholars have prepared for tonight as they have for prior events, and we are all looking forward to hearing their 7-minute talks. We talk about silver linings at this time of the pandemic, and one of the things that we talked about here is the fact that Zoom is not going away. So this is a skill set that we are building tonight, presenting on Zoom. So these scholars and all of us are going to continue to present on Zoom even when we get back to the point of being able to travel. We are joined tonight by several advisory board members. I think I saw David Morse log in, Dr. Grace Park. In addition, we have many of our ambassadors, Zhao Ma, Michael Sheridan, Yoram Rudy, Jim Wirch, Hey Ratine, and as I mentioned, Emeritus Chancellor Wrighton has joined us tonight. So thank you all for your continued support of these outstanding scholars. While communication skills are not one of the defining attributes of Academy scholars, these skills provide a support structure as our scholars develop a global mindset, their leadership skills, and they build out the scholar community. Global Leadership Visions, GLV, is one of the several activities we do as McDonnell Scholars to help develop their communication skills. The goal of GLV is very simple. It's to give our scholars a platform and the support, thank you all for being here, to express their ideas with a friendly audience. And what better crowd to do this in front of than the one we have here tonight. We have the privilege today to listen to 5 scholars discussing topics ranging from country-level COVID response, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, urban blight, and the case of tipping across different cultures. Each presentation will be approximately 7 minutes long, and upon completion of each speaker, we'll have the chance to ask a few questions via the Q&A tool. So if everyone can look at the bottom, you can see the question and answer tool, and that's where we'll be doing questions tonight. Our first speaker tonight is Rafael Cujo, who is a second-year MBA from the Olin School. His partner university is the University of Ghana. Rafael, if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera and getting your slides ready, the floor is yours. And as you know, I will just mention before I go dark here, this is a fluid evening. We're all learning how to do these different skills. So if we have any technical glitches, we're gonna roll with it. Anyway, Rafael, you're up. Thanks.
Okay, so this is going to be a mix of anecdotal and scientific observations of the culture of tipping, especially as I arrived in the US about 3 years ago, and I made the effort to integrate into the American society. I love to hang out a lot with various people, and I eat out a lot. with them. So I have some friends with whom I often went out to various eateries to eat. And anytime I went, I would just pay for the cost of the meal, and then I would leave with them. Little did I know that they added something to the cost of their food. So they were actually tipping. So I read a lot about it, and I acquainted myself with the narrative of even the adverse effects of not tipping. And sometimes it could get as bad as you receiving, bad services if you do not tip, or there were even cases where there were, maybe I would call it allegations of, chefs spitting into your food. So I decided to try this out in a buffet restaurant nearby, in the city where I lived in. That's Muncie in Indiana. So I visited the buffet restaurant about 3 or 4 times without tipping. And I realized that at that point it had become a pattern. They realized that this guy does not tip anytime he comes. So they stopped attending to me. No one even showed up to my table, and they wouldn't even come to fill my glass. um, well, that did not really bother me that much, because to me at that point, all I cared was the food was good and it was cheap and I could eat as many times as I could. So your hellos and highs did not really mean much to me. However, it was striking to me because I had the opportunity at this moment. I've had the opportunity of, eating in establishments across the world, fairly across the world in all these cities, and I realized that the waiting staff do not have that attitude towards tipping as though it's a birthright. Whether you tip or you don't, you are good to go so far as you comport yourself and you pay for what you came in to buy. So I'll take you on a trip to the business school shortly. We look at the cost drivers of the typical meal that you buy. You realize that labor is a very significant component of what you are paying for. That means the chef who is cooking your food and the waiting staff that is attending to your table is being catered for in how much you are paying to the establishment. It's not only for what is on your food. So why do you have to be mean to me if I do not tip you after I have paid for the services that you are providing to me? It didn't make sense to me. So I would also do this hypothetical appreciation of the situation. Maybe you understand it a little better. Let's look at the situation of a person that earns about $28,000. A lot of us on this call will understand what the 28,000 signifies. That means on a daily basis, you are getting $67, a day. But the average waiting staff of an establishment like, say, Salt and Smoke, which is next door to me, can wait on about a 50 client, at least a 50 clients in the day, and they're going to get at least $2 per client. We all know that people typically tip more than $2. So that would take it to $100 in the shift. So now, who is earning more and who should expect more from the other? We can look at the other end, where this is where I use Kurt as a hypothetical example. It's just hypothetical, not that I'm telling the truth or not, but it could be true, by the way. He works in WashU. He's been in WashU for over a decade, and we know that WashU is one of the richest universities in the world, so that will tell you something. And he is one of the top executives of the organization as well. That will also tell you something, that at least he's thereabouts, up there. Maybe top 1%, maybe not, but closer to that. But Kurt has a country background. That notwithstanding, one night he decides to treat himself to a 5-star experience in a restaurant, where at the end of the day, he ends up paying about $350 in the night for just him alone. And this includes the 5-star, the arbitrary 5-star experience that he's getting. After paying $350 for the overpriced wine and caviar that he bought, you expect him to pay 20% of the 350, and this 20% is non-taxable to you, and that if he does not do that, the next time he comes to your establishment, you are going to give him that mean or ill treatment. So this, to me, is absurd. I don't know how it sounds to you. So I decided to seek the opinions of people from other parts of the world, predominantly developing economies. And we are looking at people from Ghana, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Kenya, and India. Majority of them said that tipping somehow or absolutely is not expected in their home countries. But when they got into the US, they thought that the culture of tipping was either incomprehensible to them, either unfair to them, or either irrelevant. Just, I think the minority said that it was necessary to tip when you ate at the restaurant. So we realized that culturally, people are not really conversant with the idea of tipping. And we know that waiting staff are typically not very well remunerated in this country. But the question becomes, who should bear the responsibility of remunerating them? Should it be shifted onto the client who is already paying for the service, or it should be the responsibility of the employer? I don't think it's my responsibility to motivate you to give me the service that I am paying for. So I put it this way, that maybe it's a sense of entitlement that has, eaten into the system, or it's become, a part of the business culture in the American business landscape, that people should tip or add something more whenever they pay for their services. And to that end, I would think that people should learn to be empathetic towards patrons of their organizations or their establishments, because the reality is you may not be properly remunerated, or adequately remunerated. However, you are not the poorest person in the world. There may be some people who had to save throughout the week in order to afford to take their families out to dinner on a Sunday or Saturday. You shouldn't expect them to tip so much to the extent that if they do not do it, you become mean to them. Or how about assuming that they are not conversant with that idea of tipping because it does not exist in their culture, or just forming some assumptions to say, well, some people tipped, I should be grateful for that, I should be appreciative of that, and then let things go their way. I think this, in my biased opinion, is a culture of entitlement that needs to be checked. I don't know about you. Maybe this could be a conversation that we can continue after this program.
Thank you, Raphael. I will do the round of applause for everyone, because what you can hear right now is wild applause for your talk. I do want to open the floor up to questions. If anyone has a question, you can use the Q&A tool. And there we are. And I wanted to say what's very interesting about this is, as we build this global awareness and this global community, having conversations like this and really understanding what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes and somebody else's perspective is a very, interesting and core component of what we do. So it's funny to think about it in terms of tipping, because those of us from the US have just been, this is very, very normal to what we expect, but in other cultures, it's absolutely not. Jim Wirch would like to know if your experience is similar to what a lot of other scholars have. So when you did your research, did you talk to mostly scholars, or did you talk to just people that you knew from the business school or from the WashU community?
Well, these were people that I knew from the business school, WashU, and outside of WashU. And I've also had conversations with scholars in the past when we arrived about certain differences in the American culture. So kind of doing the contrastive analysis of the cultural realities and their expectations as they arrived here. And it's a continued conversation that we keep having. Some are acclimatizing to it, like they are acculturating to it. There are others who are also, I think, still in shock. I've been in the US for about 3 years, and I'm still in shock at some of the expectations. So yeah, I understand them.
Yeah. All right. I think that's the last of our questions, which means you are off the hook, as they say. I would like to take this moment to welcome our next. I feel like a reporter. I just did this with my notes. Our next speaker is Ryan Doe, who is a U.S. scholar from Florida. He is completing his master's in architect degree at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. So thank you, Ryan. Way to hit that cue, hit your mark. The floor is yours, and I'll see you in 7 minutes. Or I'll keep talking until your slides come up. How about we do?
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Laura.
All right. See you in 7.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan. I am a Master of Architecture candidate at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. And today I'm going to talk about the ruins of St. Louis, urban blight and abandonment. So as we travel throughout the US, we often come across these buildings that are in disrepair, and they've often become a familiar part of the American landscape. But it wasn't until I moved to St. Louis that I started to notice that there are a lot more buildings in poor conditions here than in any other place. And so today, a lot of these pictures and information that I'm sharing with you actually came from my own personal experience. So St. Louis is one of the highest rates of vacancy in the US. It's consistently in the top 30, with around 25,000 properties that are empty, 12,000 of which are owned by the government, the Land Revitalization Authority, and 13,000 are privately owned. And so why is this an issue? Why is vacancy an issue? So first, vacancy impacts the whole neighborhood. It's a magnet for crime and arson. A lot of people come here and they squat and they accidentally start fires, or they do drug deals here. It leads to the economic decline in the neighborhood. People don't want to invest in these communities anymore. They want to move out of them. And overall, there's a decrease in the quality of life. There's a certain sense of social fragmentation that happens as these people feel disconnected from the community, as they don't get the same amount of services as other people do. And to understand why this occurred in St. Louis, we have to understand some of the history. After World War II, there's a lot of unemployment as industries moved away from the city center and into the suburbs. White flight happens, where middle-class citizens moved to the outskirts of the city, and a huge population loss from 1960 to 1990. But probably the most important ones were the redlining that occurred, where the banks refused loans to these areas of financial risk, which happened to lobby African-American communities. And the same when the city planners defined these areas to be in decline, and they want to use it for redevelopment, for highways and other kind of infrastructure. But it was very unfair because a lot of these communities were actually thriving. And so in present time, you can see from this map that there's a large north and south disparity in vacancy. All the black dots are all the vacant areas in St. Louis, and the purple is where all the African-American communities are mostly located. And so that divide between Forest Park and the Arch is very prominent. And there are several reasons for these buildings that continue to be vacant, but I'm going to touch upon 3 main ones. The prolonged probate, where a lot of the owners that die from these houses, they don't have inheritors, and so the ownership is ambiguous. Outside investors who invest in these communities in St. Louis, they buy the land, the LRA land, but they do little to maintain or upkeep the property. And overall, there's just a lack of resources. People don't have the financial means to improve their living conditions. So the mayor has led to several current initiatives to combat this vacancy problem. The Finest 15 is where they take the best buildings and they renovate them to resell them. There's an increase in demolition funding, about 3.6 million to get rid of the buildings that are beyond repair. Adaptive reuse is where they take the building and they convert it into something new that wasn't original purpose, but they keep the historical qualities of it. And so I like this one. It's the skate park in St. Louis that is inside an abandoned church. There's the Mode to Own program where residents who live next to these abandoned properties, as long as they take care of it for 2 years, they can buy the property for $125. And then they use a lot of these empty lands for this urban greening initiative and converting it into parks. And lastly, all those are LRA properties, but the private properties, they try to enforce the laws better now by making them register as a vacant building. And then they have to upkeep it or else they get fined $200. And so I'm going to close my presentation by looking at a case study that my class did last semester, where we went to this abandoned church in the north side of St. Louis. And this church was started in 1896. It used to have over 1,000 attendees, but since the 1980s has fallen to disrepair and has been victim of theft, graffiti. But until last semester, Brittany Breeden, a local, came and bought the property from the old owners and is trying to renovate it, but does not know exactly what she wants to do yet. And so that's where my class came and offered some proposals. So just some slight context, this church, you can see the effect it has on the rest of the community. All these orange areas are all abandoned and vacant that over time as this church also became desecrated. And so my proposal was to create and use this church as a community center. And so you can give it back to the neighborhood and make people come back to this community and use it. The main space can be converted into a flexible event space, the altar turned into a stage, and the back can be used as classrooms. And so these are just some renderings I created to show the church and what it could be. This is the current state of what it is now. It's very in disrepair, but you could turn it into a flexible performance venue or even like a marketplace for people to come and sell their goods. In the back, what's called the narthex of the church, if we close it off, you can turn it into a classroom space for people to come and utilize. And so to conclude, vacancy affects all of us on a personal, local, and regional level, according to the mayor of St. Louis, Lita Cruzen. And not only is this hyper vacancy a representation of the city, but it damages the social, physical health of those who live in its proximity. And so in order to improve the lives of our neighbors, we must first give new purpose to these vacant buildings. Thank you.
I have to unmute so you can hear the clapping, the wild applause. I should have actually, it would have been nice if I would have had a pre-roll of applause, like a laugh track and things like that. Thank you very much, Ryan. You know, one of my favorite things about doing these presentations with the scholars is the change that I get to see from the beginning, from their first idea of what they're going to talk about through their practice session to this session. So Ryan, your slides looked great. I think you did a really, really nice job hitting all of your main points. I will open up for questions. Let's have a look. When architects take on this sort of a project, do they try to collaborate with others like social work, sociologists, etc.? That is a very interesting question.
Yeah, I hear many opportunities where they do collaborate with social work. There are times where they will consult the community and see what they want from it. And usually that just comes through working with the owner. So for example, that church, she's talking to several architects about the structure of the building and what she thinks the rest of the community would want. So it's really working with the clients, but I do think that's something that's important that architects should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, you'd hate to build something wonderful like this community center that doesn't get used because that's just not the main thing that community wanted or needed. Another compliment first, very interesting talk. For the church project, you proposed to turn into a community center. Can you tell us more about the members of the community today? So I think the question is more a little bit along the same lines of where you just were. That slide that showed sort of where the church was in relation to the rest of the community. Who lives around there? And is that part of the project as you build out the space?
Yeah, so the people who live there are people who obviously don't love the neighborhood and don't want to leave. Mostly like residents who lived there for years. And the purpose of the community center was, when we looked at the site, there wasn't really anything for recreation or entertainment in the neighborhood. And so providing something like that is giving back to the community and giving them something that they can call their own, that you don't have to go out of Old North to go and utilize.
Perfect. I do have one more question, I think. So it's like reading these live. You know, I would not have been a good newscaster. As you noted, the population of the city of St. Louis has declined from over 800,000 to about 300,000 today. Abandoned property must therefore be a consequence. What do you think can be done to attract people and businesses back to the city? So is there a way to sort of reverse that trend, which would help the vacancy rates?
Yeah, I think that's a very loaded but interesting question. When I was walking through there with one of the residents who was rebuilding all the properties, I asked him that same question. And he told me that in order to get people to come back here, you need to give them something to do, something that they would want to come back here for. If that's something that's recreational, or just providing services like transportation to neighborhoods so they can get in and out of it, or just something similar like restaurants, a place to come back to. But right now it's just empty. Right.
Without services and food, and you have these food wastelands or deserts where you can't even find a grocery store, that it is very hard to then create a community around that. I am going to let you off the hook. Thank you again for your talk. And we'll see you all at the end when we bring everyone back up on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So our next dynamic duo, we have a little bit of a dynamic duo tonight, is Harper Chen. She's the first of our two speakers to talk about local response to the COVID pandemic. And Harper is a second-year law school student. I'm just tripping right over that. She's studying for her JSD. Her partner university is National Taiwan University, and she's going to talk about Taiwan's COVID response. Thank you for joining, Harper. Good luck, smile. I know it's very late where you are, so I appreciate everything you're doing to be here tonight. Don't forget to unmute.
Okay, then I'll start it. Hi, I'm Harper, and I come from Taiwan. I'm a JSD student at WashU Law. The topic I will introduce you today is combating COVID-19, the story from Taiwan. I will provide you the most important 3 keys of Taiwan, I think, to deal with COVID-19. And this is my agenda. Before we start, I will provide you some statistics. Then you will understand the current situation in Taiwan. Then we will look into the most important 3 keys: public awareness, national health insurance, and government infection control strategy. About the case number, to provide you some statistics, I drew a graph. Now there are about 24 million people in Taiwan. Until November 30, Taiwan has had 675 cases with 7 deaths. The red line means imported case, which is 583. And the blue one is local case, which is 55. And looking to this graph, there is no local case after May, about more than 200 days. And there has been no second wave so far. So what are the keys to Taiwan to be such a peaceful island? I think the first key is public awareness. And let me introduce you a sad story. In 2003, when SARS began in China, Taiwan didn't get much information in the beginning because Taiwan was not a member of WHO. And most of Taiwan's information was received from third party. That significantly bogged down the process. Then SARS began to spread over Taipei City. The government had no choice but lock down the hospital and finally caused more than 300 cases in 70 days. We learned a lot from SARS, and we understand that the pandemic is a killer and how terrible it could be if we don't take it serious. We also understand the importance of disease fighting habits like hand washing and mask wearing. So after SARS, Taiwanese also promoted the public awareness. We legalized the framework of communicable disease control medical networks under Communicable Disease Control Act, including setting up central epidemic command center, improving reporting system, appointing responsible hospitals, and providing funds. And this is the photo of our Central Epidemic Command Center that set up in January. This center integrates medical resource, performs contact tracing, holds daily press conference, and promoting ongoing policies. We also set up a helpline to answer questions about COVID-19. The second key, I think, is national health insurance. Our concept of medical insurance is healthy for all. It provides high quality and affordable medical resource to Taiwan. Universal healthcare system establishes the network of central hospitals and local clinics, easy access for everyone. From the perspective of public health, these two systems ensure the government will take care of you even though you have less money. So it may decrease your motivation to hide your illness. Regarding to mask, we learned from SARS that mask is important to pandemic. So when COVID-19 started, government stockpiled all domestically produced masks and banned export to make sure that we have enough masks, especially for medical workers. And also started to produce more masks to provide all citizens on a regular basis. The government also set up a central distribution of masks to deliver masks to everyone with their NHI card. Then the third key, I think, is government infection control strategy. So I will introduce you 4 main strategies today. The first thing I think is the most important one, which is border control. And let me introduce you the concept of this policy. As you know that Taiwan is an island, and the island nations are the original self-isolators. So if we see our airports as the border, then we can block the virus at the border. Take a look at this graph. This is the schedule of our entry bans. When Taiwan began shutting down to all foreigners in March, the red line of imported case was decreasing. That means we successfully blocked the virus coming to Taiwan. But we still need to balance our economic and public health, right? So when the situation was getting better, we loosened our border control in June, allowing foreign workers coming to Taiwan. So at the same time, the imported case was increasing. And because we still have mandatory 14-day quarantine policy for everyone who enters Taiwan, so our local case is still 0. Going back to quarantine policy, when you arrive in Taiwan, you have to take quarantine taxi from airport to quarantine hotel or your home to start 14-day mandatory quarantine. Your village chef and police officer will call you and locate you during these 14 days. And if you break the rule, you have to pay fines. When a command center finds confirmed case, they will do contact tracing and investigation work. All contacts must do testing and undergo a 14-day mandatory quarantine, even if they test negative. The last policy is mandatory mask wearing in public venues, such as schools, churches, hospitals, and transportation. And these are government infection control strategy, and so far, they are effective. In conclusion, the purpose for me to introduce this topic today is because I think the COVID-19 is our human beings' common enemy today. And there might be another unknown pandemic in the future that we don't know now. So if we can share our experience and cooperate with each other to fight together, then I believe we can have a better preparation for the next pandemic. Public awareness, national health insurance, and government infection control strategy are three keys of Taiwan, I think, to deal with COVID-19 successfully so far. However, to follow these regulations, we are required to sacrifice part of our individual freedom for the sake of public health. So how to balance our individual freedom and public health will be an important issue addressed when enacting infection control policies. For example, some people may think mandatory quarantine limit their freedom of movement, and contact tracing work may intrude privacy rights. And mandatory mask wearing may restrict their freedom of expression. So in the end, I would like to provide you two questions to think about it. The first is, how can we better prepare for the next pandemic? And to what extent are you willing to sacrifice your individual freedom for the sake of public health? Thank you.
Oh, see, I tried to do an applause thing and it's got ads, I tell ya. This is what I wanted you to hear. Thank you very much, Harper. I think this is a very interesting way to think about it when you think about the policy perspective of how Taiwan is combating this pandemic. And it's such a lovely setup for your friend Poom, who will be our next speaker. But before we get there, let's give you an opportunity to answer a couple questions. Let's see. Oh, so I like this question. This is a challenging one. So, you know, if you want to phone a friend, you know, we can do that. Great presentation, and it's great for Taiwan as well. How do you think blocking the border for 3 months impacted the economy?
Actually, we have the economy has been affected much in Taiwan for 3 months. But I think the most important thing is because we couldn't go traveling. So people like travel to Taiwan like a domestically travel. So let help to increase Taiwan's economy as well. And on the other hand, the government gave us so many discounts for traveling and buying in like an art. You can go to see a movie or buy books. So a lot of things we can help ourselves to support our domestic stores. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. We have many questions coming in. I'm trying to just get through them. And let's see, what about address containment and management of health? What about vaccines and therapies? What was done on the health front? Do you know, in Taiwan? It's interesting though, because your case count overall was quite low. So I wonder if the therapies were developed as quickly in Taiwan as they were in other places.
I think as I know that we don't have a precise treatment for COVID-19. Yeah, so what we can do, I think we can buy vaccines from other countries. So important one is how to say much efficiency than we produce by ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then somebody wanted to know if the schools in Taiwan were ever closed.
Actually, in January, we delayed our start of the semester. So
Okay.
actually, yeah, so our second semester, originally it starts in the end of January, but this year we delayed it in the middle of February. So the government has 2 weeks to prepare it. So until now, how to say, so start the semester in February, then so far we don't have any close.
Right, but I mean, it sounds like that mitigation strategy of closing the borders and eliminating local cases coupled with delaying the school semester start means that most Taiwanese students had a fairly, we'll call it, dare I say, normal experience this past semester. So there are lots of questions in, but I'm going to let you off the hook because we've got to get on the screen. So thank you everyone who asked questions. We'll look to see if we can get those answered over email perhaps a little bit later. So thank you, Harper.
Yeah, thank you.
And our second speaker, hi Poom, to talk about the COVID response is Poom Siddhisamwang, and he is a second year scholar in the EECE program, Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering program at McKelvey. And he is from Thailand and our partner Chulalongkorn. So I will let you take it away and give us the very different perspective from Thailand.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Can you hear me clearly and see my presentation?
Both I can do, see and hear.
Oh, very well, nice, thank you. So, hello everyone, my name is Poom Siddhisamwang. I am now in EEC department, in engineering department. I graduated from Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. Today, I would like to present how Thailand dealt with the first wave of COVID-19. In this presentation, I would like to start by talking briefly about Thailand from late 2019 to May 2020, and talk more about the details about the context and the heroes. At the end, I would like to talk very short about my thoughts, my gratitude towards people. In late 2019, it was a high season for tourists. Yet we concerned a little bit about the news that we received about strange pneumonia in Wuhan. And in January, Thailand took a very different path from Taiwan. So yeah, people were quite reckless and some of them concerned, but many of them, they don't recognize this as a problem until Wuhan was locked down. So we realized that something was wrong. And at some point, Thailand was the second worst country in the world, second to only China. In February, apart from COVID-19, Thailand was also plagued by fake news, ineffective response by the government, and also shortages of medical supply. In early March, the situation looks even more grim. One of the patients died. The government tried very hard by enforcing social distancing, but it was too late. There were a series of major outbreaks, and the cases gradually increased to 100. And in late March, the government tried even harder by postponing Songkran Festival. Songkran is not just another festival. To give you some idea, the Western have Christmas, the Chinese have Chinese New Year, the Thai have Songkran, and even World War II did not stop people from celebrating Songkran. So it was unthinkable that there would be such an event like this. Yet something unexpected and remarkable happened. But first, let's talk more about the context. Thai doctors are the best of the best. I personally know this because the medical students used to outperform me during high school. And yeah, you can see that hurts me. And many of them work very hard after graduation and study abroad. So they're quite the best and so competent, like the gentleman in the picture. Dr. Yong Puvarawan, he saved my father's life from deadly disease decades ago before I was even born. So this is like example why people highly respect the doctors. And so I said, the prime minister invited 5 of the top medical experts to give him some advice and also to join an organization that informed the public daily about the situation about COVID-19 and how to deal with it. This marks the beginning of effective response, yet the crisis is far from over. So in late March, the prime minister tried even harder. Sometimes he failed, yet his response became even more effective every time he tried. Yet we worry so much because the cases gradually increased to 1,000. In April, the people and the government tried their best to bring the curve down or flatten the curve. So in May, people were safe and the government relieved the measures. And next, I would like to talk more about the context and about the heroes who invest their freedom for more freedom. They do this by either working very hard in their jobs like medical personnel or providing supply and also awareness to the people. On the supply side, apart from the government, we also have the king who provide 100 respirators to the hospital and found a rapid test team to effectively deal with future waves of COVID-19. We also have the private sectors who alleviate the economic crisis and also provide the medical supply to the people. On the awareness side, there was an organization that I mentioned, found by the Prime Minister and consists of the doctors who analyze the data and also inform the public daily, similar to Taiwan, I believe. Apart from formal information, we also have medical personnel and the patients who 3 of them are celebrities, and they inform the people how to deal with COVID-19 and how to stay safe and report the situation about the medical frontline, like in the hospital, which were in crisis. And culture and experience are also important. In Thailand, the religious leaders prioritize the safety and tell the people to follow the government's guideline. So it was so effective that even superstitious people know that this time science comes first. Before 2003, people just hate wearing masks and have a very negative opinion about it, until we learned from Japan during 2003 SARS crisis that it's about responsibility, love, and care. And at the pinnacle of the story, we have Thai peoples who are the real heroes. The public awareness was very high, same as Taiwan. So people start wearing masks as early as January. And if this is not enough, we also add more face shields for further protection. Not enough? Okay, we wash our hands, practice social distancing, and take those things seriously. And because they know the limited capacity of the healthcare system, and more importantly, simply, we don't want to die or cause our loved one to die. And I discussed with Harper that the Taiwanese also share the same opinion. And some of them also joined 1 million, a group of volunteers consists of 1 million people. So they are trained volunteers who are trained to perform basic medical procedures, and they are all over the country at each villages. And during the pandemic, they inform the people how to deal with COVID-19 and also screen the patients in each village. And also for the immigrants community, like this lady who is among the Burmese communities, she coordinated with the community to make the whole community safer so that the whole country can be safer together. To sum up, Thailand has about 70 million population and 60 deaths, while the US and St. Louis County got more. The story about Thailand that I would like you to memorize just very short is that it's a story of a group of people tried their best to make the country safe. In this presentation, my thought is that I love the US. I want to show my gratitude by inspiring people and giving hope. And I present about Thailand, which is drastically different from Taiwan, to show that we can do it. And I also wish for multinational cooperation, because combining our strengths can make the whole world safer again from the pandemic. And at the end, I would like to thank you, my parents, who inspired me to present this topic. Thank you, Laura and Harper, for this wonderful presentation. And coordination. And at the end, thank you all of you for your attention. Thank you.
And the clapping, the wild applause. Yes, this is not the end. Don't let your guard down yet. I will open the floor for questions, although I do nothing but start reading. And I just wanted to say what's so striking about the two conversations is one is such a policy-led conversation, and the other one is very much a people and culture-led response to the pandemic. And I loved seeing how both were very effective in their, I can't say countries, but in their local communities, and yet they were very different. So I appreciate you guys giving us the dual perspective on that response. An anonymous attendee said, "Awesome talk, Poom." So thank you, Anonymous. And Enoch says, "Great presentation." So here is one actual question. Harper talked about the trade-off between public health and individual rights in Taiwan. Was this a contentious issue in Thailand?
Yes, it is quite a big issue that I understand that people are sometimes concerned about their rights and their freedom because like the government suddenly has too much power and you lose some freedom. But in our cases, I believe that it is about the people because they know what is the consequences of the pandemic. It will only get worse if we let our guard down. So people like the celebrities that I mentioned earlier, they intentionally sacrifice their freedom so that the people around them could be safer. And I also emphasize that it's about like invest some freedom for more freedom in the future, because now Thailand doesn't have to be locked down in any provinces, because like they have been working very hard in April or May. So I hope that answers your questions.
It does. Were the schools ever shut down in Thailand? Okay.
Yes, for a very long time, and they delayed the opening of the semester until like July, middle of July maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like school in Thailand is different.
Yeah, the partitions were present in one of those photos. So again, it's just a very different way to approach it, but the coordination across many different areas of the Thai society just really shows you what's possible when everyone is sort of pointed in the same direction with the same end goal. So thank you very, very much. Great talk. I can tell you practice, good work. And you're done.
Thank
so
you.
good work. Our last speaker, not least, but our last speaker of the evening is Gil Eckstein from IDC, Interdisciplinary Center Hersliya. He is also an MBA student at Olin, and he's going to talk on a very different topic, completely different topic, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from a very personal perspective, a personal story. So Gil, don't forget to unmute. And your slides are up. They look good. As soon
as yes,
you're ready. You're live. All right, see you in 7.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you everybody for coming over here and attending this online session. I'm Gil. I'm a second MBA student here at Olin Business School, and I want to tell you a story about myself, how a boy that comes from a lefty family found himself serving in the combat unit in the middle of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the West Bank. Now, I would like to note that this is not a political lecture. I'm not supporting an agenda. I'm here to tell you my story and what I learned from it, and I hope that you can learn something too. So let's get started. So this is me dressed up for Purim. It's kind of like the Jewish Halloween. And you can see by the shape of the TV that I was born in the early 90s, in 1990. I was a quiet kid, a little shy. I lived between Israel and the US until I became an adult, and I was less shy to tell my parents that I want to stop doing that. I am the youngest of 3, both served in the military. My brother on the right side of the left image, he's 7 years older than I am, was in an intelligence unit in the military. My sister with the baby on her shoulders. She is 12 years older than I am and was a Krav Maga instructor. And my family has been on the left side of politics when it comes to the conflict. And in Israel, the political debate regarding the conflict, I mean, it's about many things, but typically three main topics: the territories of Israelis and Palestinians and a settlement. Should there be one or two state solution, and then who will govern and how it will get managed? And I'm not even going to get into the economics of this. And then Jerusalem, should we divide it or not? Now, the far right is not willing to compromise on anything. The far left is exactly the opposite, and the center approach doesn't really offer a solution that everyone can agree on. But I grew up with the notion, when it comes to like what does left mean, the notion that we need to do whatever entails peace, as long as it doesn't put our future at risk. And one important note was about the 90s. So the 90s were different than today in the sense that there was a sense of optimism regarding peace with Palestinians. On the right side, you can see King Hussein and Prime Minister Rabin signing the Jordan-Israeli peace agreement in '94. On the left side, you see the Oslo agreement with Rabin and Yasser Arafat, which basically meant that Israel and Palestine will agree to find a way to work it out by the year 2000. And the bottom line here is that people believed in peace. People had hope, at least enough to tell me when I was young, when you grow up, Gil, you wouldn't need to go to the military because there will be no more wars. Well, then I grew up, and when I was 18, I joined the military, and the Israeli military is a mandatory service. Men have to do 3 years, females do 2 years, although there are some female combat soldiers that do 3 years. It's a social responsibility, and this is also how it's regarded among society. Everyone knows that it sucks, but everyone does that anyways. On the left side, this is me and my mom when I finished basic training. On the right side, this is me and my team after advanced training. And in the middle, this is when we were seniors standing in our vehicle in our base in the West Bank. Now, when it comes to the West Bank, this is where I served most of my service. And the West Bank is under Israeli occupation, but who lives and governs it is determined by separation into 3 different zones. There's A, B, C. Now, the orange side are A territories, which means that only Arabs live there and is led and governed by their local Palestinian authority, Fatah. The beige area is a combination of Arab and Israeli territories, also led by Fatah, secured by a combination of Palestinian police and Israeli military. And the gray zone is C zone, which means that it's populated also with a mixture, but mainly basically Israeli. And you can see here the complexity in separating the territories in a unified manner without taking anyone out of their home. This has been going for a long time, and conflicts happen because everything is very condensed. And the conflicts are between Israeli Palestinian citizens and between Israeli military, as well as operations regarding national security. Those were definitely not the, I would say, American Pie college parties that I would see in the movies. I would sit in my post and see those movies and would ask myself, what am I doing here? Why am I here and not having just a good time? I want to live in peace, but I guess that's just the reality that I was born into, and that was my duty. When I had to get into conflicts, my rationale to all of this was, well, if someone needs to do it, might as well be me and not some extremist looking for a fight. And I even got to know some people over there, local Palestinians, and we had coffee together, we bonded, we chatted. And what did I learn from all of this by being there is that most people on both sides would prefer to live in peace if that was made possible. Not everyone is a hater, but both sides also fear each other. And it's kind of this prisoner's dilemma, whoever knows it. It basically means that if both sides trusted each other and cooperated, they would get a better outcome. But they fear that the other side will be greedy and will leave them with nothing. Therefore, they choose the safe choice. And you know what? For a reason, because both sides have extremists that capitalize political power on that fear and justify some actions that eventually lead to war. So I'm sorry if I was a little depressing, but my main point is that instead of trying to understand each other, we are growing apart of each other. I see it in my own eyes. I was also hating sometimes, and it gets tough at tough times, but it's important not to. And it's true not just about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is true across the world. I also see it in the United States, especially in the last elections. So if you'll ask me, Gil, despite everything that you've been through, do you still believe that there's a chance for peace? Well, I'll tell you that I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? So if there's one takeaway that I would like us to take from all of this, is that hating on the other side doesn't help anyone. We have to try to do better, to understand the other side and not be afraid of it. We must do our best where we can, while we can, to make things better and hope for better days, because if we don't, we already gave up. So please take what I presented over here in a positive note, put a smile upon your face, and show your neighbors some love, because that's all we can do, and we can also do much better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil. That was actually really great, and thank you for the added hope at the end. I really appreciate. I actually really appreciate the thought process across, not just the Israel-Palestinian conflict, but how similar a lot of these concepts are across the U.S. While we don't have a specific war, we certainly have a similar attitude from Republican to Democrat and left versus right over here, and the extremist, really kind of wagging the dog with just the tail, as they say. I think that recognition that we can all do better is really important right now. So Enoch, thanks you for your service in the military. We all do. I think it's very interesting to have, that social construct that is just part of your growing up. And I can't imagine how disappointing it was to grow up thinking that was not going to be part of what your reality was. So, thank you for all of us. So distrust and fake news is not new. How can this be changed, and who can own this? So is there a way? What's your opinion there?
So that's a tough one. I can just only give my humble opinion. I'm not a communications expert, but I can say that it's our responsibility as individuals, especially if we want to take an opinion in this matter, to be informed by as many resources as possible and reach out for more and more information, not just from one channel, because each channel has a little bit of their own side of the story. Even when I get to speak with I got to speak recently. Actually, I had an Uber drive with a son of a Palestinian. It was actually from an area that I was serving in, and we got to talk. I usually am not like I don't hide it, and it was interesting because we had a conversation, and he asked me all these really tough questions because he only got one side of the story, and when I gave him my side of the story, I told him, listen, but you should also try to look for other resources. Obviously, as much as I can try, I'm not, I am what I am, and and I have. And I'm also biased because where I grew up and what did I know. So I think that the main point is try to be as informed as you can and reach out to as many sources. And I think that this is one way to really do a better job in this. Another way is just we have to, each side has to improve also their communication, but obviously each side has kind of like are pretty much biased, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting, if you recall, this is very much really aligned with the mission of the Academy, is really understanding another culture, another person's perspective. And I'm reminded of the talk of Ping Chuan and Leo Lam when they were talking about the same issues or the same events, and then the representation in their own local newspapers on those very same events, and they were completely opposite. And when you think about how do you find sources and how do you check your sources and how do you make sure that you are looking across a variety of sources, knowing that there is inherent bias in everything. I think Zhao Ma actually does one of his seminars on this very issue. So
the China-Hong Kong conversation, by the way, was something that kind of like gave me the inspiration to do my own talk, because when I saw this, I was like, oh wow, this is exactly the same conflict that I'm having. And then the US elections came, and then basically I was like, okay, I guess that I'm not alone in this.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely not. So I have one more question, and they're somewhat similar. So the idea is, can the military be a possible collaborator in peace rather than in war? So, when you have this situation where you have to have military service, when you said in your talk, you said, I'm glad it was me rather than some extremists. So it sounds like you're already leaning towards this idea of peace collaboration, perhaps, rather than warmongering.
So, I mean, having an army operating obviously doesn't really have a connotation of peace, right? But then again, there are a lot of like peace acts that exist in the military. Basically, even one that I was doing, the idea was to try to mitigate things, and then obviously things sometimes went on a different direction. So it's kind of like there's no like black and white in this matter. There are a lot of gray areas, and but in general, the notion and the idea is to try to strive for peace, to minimize conflicts. But sometimes it works, sometimes less. As I said, I met some extremists, and they exist in my country as well. And it's it will be best to have less of those. But also, Israeli flies medical troops abroad when there's natural disasters. They also, during the COVID time, they were helping in national security to help people, not only Israelis, but Palestinians. So actually, these kind of like tough times bring us together. The bad times, it's ironic, but they bring us more together, and that usually hits the news and gives us a little bit more hope for peace. So when things go well, it's kind of like actually not really going good for the conflict. There's a negative correlation between that.
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't really have a good answer for it, but yeah, I think that definitely military is supposed to entail a peace component in it, and nobody wants war. That's eventually the point of my presentation.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I would like to invite all of our panelists today and Kurt to join us back on screen with your cameras. And since we don't have the ability, we're still missing someone. Since we don't have the ability to hear the whole world clapping, perhaps we could all take off our, unmute yourself for a moment. And let's give ourselves and yourselves a round of applause. All right.
Well, I'll go ahead and wrap us up then this evening. You know, when we were thinking about this year, we asked the question, you know, do we do GLV, and if so, how? And maybe for the audience, it was also, do I attend tonight? And I'm so glad that we did this for several reasons. One is, as I think Laura mentioned at the beginning, it's a great opportunity for our second-year students to practice a skill which is going to become, I think, increasingly important, to be able to do a talk like this and under difficult circumstances. So I think for our scholars who you saw tonight, although painful, I think it was, I'm so glad that we did it for you for that. Second, a key reason why we do this is to learn a little bit about each other. And I think you saw everyone's personality as well as what they're thinking about and a little bit about their background. And I learned something new about each of our scholars today and really found that interesting. So I'm personally really glad for that. And then finally, so important to continue to build our community in this time when we can't see each other, we can't be together. And so I think tonight was a great opportunity for that. So let me thank, in closing then, first to thank each of our scholars for putting in the work to adapt to do this tonight, for sharing your story with us. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the audience did also. Second, to thank Laura. I know this was, she had to pivot to figure out how do I work with the scholars to do this. Thank you, Laura. Great job for helping them pull this off, as well as learn the skill, which I think, again, is going to be important to them. And then finally, hey, thank you for the audience for joining us tonight. I know many of you may have been on Zooms many times today. Had a long day this evening. Some of you are joining us from different time zones. But again, the community part is so important to continue the community, as well as to support each other and to be here for the students, to ask great questions of them. And so thank you for joining us tonight. This is, I think, our only fall GLV that we are having, but we have several come up in the spring. So look for those in the spring to learn something about the rest of our second-year students, to bringing us together, an opportunity to bring us together in the spring also. I think that's all we have tonight. Go enjoy the rest of your evening, or for Harper, the rest of your day. And we will look forward to seeing you hopefully before the spring, and again, hopefully sometime in person.
Of course.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.